Welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2020, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Barclays Access and Adobe. You can follow us on Twitter at ID24Conf. And if you have questions for the presenters, tweet them using the ID24 hashtag, and those will be added to our Q&A at the end of the session. A reminder that ID24 is a respectful community. You can find our code of conduct on the inclusivedesign24.org event site. Joe?
Hi everybody, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the next speakers, Charlie Turrell and Gareth Ford-Williams, who will be answering the question, why have a team when you can have an army? Take it away, Gareth and Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much for the intro. I'm Gareth Ford-Williams, Head of Design, Accessibility at the BBC. Charlie?
And I'm Charlie Turrell, so I'm the Change Manager in the Accessibility team.
Charlie's actually going to be driving most of this talk. She's actually got all the interesting things to say, but I'm going to try and give it a little bit of context and a bit of history at the beginning, because we've been doing this around thinking about champions and networks, etc., really since the accessibility team started, and taking kind of quite a community-based approach. And we've had the Champions Network by name, the Champions Network, for the last 8 years. So Charlie will take you through the sort of the ins and outs, where we are with that, where we're going to go with that, some of the ups and some of the downs. And I'll kind of give us a little bit of background about the BBC and kind of what the accessibility team does, because then it gives you context of why a Champions Network is so important. So, shift slides. So, history of the for accessibility at the BBC. So, it actually, as an organisation, I mean, it's nearly 100 years old as an organisation now, and its history of accessibility goes back not 100 years, but it goes back to the 1950s, and which is why it's been, I wouldn't say, always an easy path, which, there's always complexities to every organization, but it's why it's been an easy path for us around the argument around accessibility at the BBC. Within its charter, the BBC says it's for everyone. You can't put really exceptions around everyone. There's no except them in it, and so we kind of infer accessibility as part and parcel of that word everyone. And every director general, who's the person who runs the BBC, if you're not familiar with the way that they work, so the director general is kind of at the head of the organization, and every single director general talks about the fact that it has to be for all. We've just had a new one just start 2 weeks ago, and his first sentence to the organization in his first speech was, we have to deliver value for all. And so we pull that permission from that word all. So it started accessibility at the BBC back in 1957, when the BBC started doing InVision signing on weekend news, and so had a stand-up signer next to the news reporter, simply because the producer of the news, a very, very close friend of theirs, was culturally deaf, and they couldn't access TV, so he ended up putting a signer actually on set InVision all the way through, and we still do InVision signing for 5% of the entirety of our output. It then extended into the sort of late 1960s, early 70s, when they were developing CFAX, which was our television text-based service, and a wonderful individual called Professor Alan Newell worked with the BBC to build the first closed captioning service for broadcast, which launched at the end of the 1970s. And then we were part of a group of organizations in the 90s that pioneered audio description. And so it's one of those where it just seems to be, it's part of the natural makeup of the organization that we do accessibility, and we try and, sort of be as innovative as we can. And so when it came to a conversation I had back in about 2005 with some senior management, which was more about me kind of moaning a bit about accessibility in our digital output, They took it on themselves to turn it into my problem, and I set up the accessibility team. I wasn't actually intending on doing that at the time, but that's another long story to tell over a beer over any of you if you're ever short someone to talk to. And so this is where we've been for the last 15 years. We've been trying to understand what accessibility means in basically a network of other people, a framework of other people's technologies, browsers, operating systems, devices, etc. Which is in an ever-evolving product innovative space, and trying to deal with everything from not just delivering open standards, but actually understanding all of the stuff that's right at the cutting edge of innovation. We try and we don't try and build things and make them accessible. We try and build accessible things, and we try and innovate with sort of a very inclusive concept in mind. So. Accessibility teams, it currently stands, there's 7 of us. There's myself, there's 2 change managers, Rebecca Nancaro and Charlie, who you'll be hearing from in a bit. Alice Whittle, who's our technical project manager, Jamie Knight. Sorry, there's 8 members. There's also Mr. Lyon. Lyon is a very important part of the team. And so Jamie and Lyon have been a sort of a duo within the team since he joined the BBC. Sorry, he wasn't in the team when he joined the BBC. He was in another team, but we poached him. Emma Knight Richards and Michael Matthews. And so Jamie, Emma and Michael are senior research engineers. And we're part of user experience and design, which is one of those things which it's always kind of an interesting thing to work out, is where does accessibility sit in an organization? I mean, it kind of sits everywhere because it's everyone's responsibility and everyone has a role to play in delivering accessibility. But we sit in user experience and design because really at the end of the day, you design things. You can't build an accessible thing that's been designed to be inaccessible. It's really important that we're at that point. And so we feed into everything from the global experience language, which is the BBC's design system. UX and D, so user experience and design is horizontal in the organization. So that makes it incredibly useful for us because they have teams in every team. It just kind of makes sense structurally and functionally and practically to sit within UX. The team does 3 things. We build resources to be used by the organization, which includes standards and guidelines and other bits and pieces, which I'll get to in a minute. We try and instill knowledge in all of the teams across the organization. It's one of those things where I don't believe that an accessibility team should be the part of the organization that owns accessibility. It should be with everyone. It's not a dark art, it's just something that we should all do. But we help sort of direct it and nurture it. And the best way you can do that is by spreading knowledge across the organization and enabling people to do stuff for themselves. And the way that happens is through the champions, and Charlie will talk a little bit about that in a bit. So we have our own standards and guidelines. We've had our own standards and guidelines since 2006. I mean, they actually are mostly derived from WCAG, but what we did in the early days is when we started using WCAG, is we realized that WCAG didn't cover everything that we needed it to cover, and it needed contextualizing in place. So we took it and we remodeled it based on how we build things and based on our own ethos as an organization. And so there's massive crossovers between the two and huge similarities, but there's also, some subtle but important differences. And I think it's one of those things is, WCAG's great. It's a fabulous resource, but it's agnostic. And sometimes that's one of those things is don't just take it as it is, take it and think about it in terms of the products that you're building and recontextualize it. To make standards and guidelines actually usable, it's one of the biggest problems with standards and guidelines is they're not the easiest things to use if you don't use them on a daily basis. Michael on the team drives a project called GelTech Docs, which is a documentation-driven development approach. Hayden Pickering was the inspiration behind this approach that we do. You know, we're all building components these days, and then components then are turned into products and pulled together. So by building the accessibility into the components, we kind of, you know, make the entire task an enormous amount easier in sort of, you know, a large and complex organization. So it's one of those things that we're doing. We're still developing, and we're still working, you know, sort of with specialists around this, around the delivery of this, and still finding our way. But we find it makes the entire thing a lot more efficient. It reduces the noise, and it sort of reduces the friction that can be caused if you take a kind of more auditing approach. I'm not a massive fan of auditing. I think you audit to learn, you audit to do, you know, monitor, but using auditing as part of an actual process is sometimes a bit counterproductive. It's usually, you know, a lot of information too late, and it becomes a problem to manage. We also, Rebecca on the team, Becky, she drives the side around knowledge. We have various courses that we're doing, obviously because of the last 6 months and everything going in lockdown. It's all being shifted online, and, you know, designing for screen readers is actually sort of the first course that she managed to shift over, working with BBC Academy, who are our training division. And we're going to see more and more of this, and it also helps us to scale the training that goes. This is, you know, we find the courses are always incredibly popular, massively oversubscribed. There's always people wanting to do it, and people want to learn more, and so we sort of drive a lot of that. And we have the champions. These are a few of them, and we have roughly 210. I can't remember the exact number that we've got at the moment. It's constantly changing. They're all people that have come to us. We've never promoted or tried to do a recruitment drive. It's just naturally grown. It was interesting. For years, it was always around about the 30-odd, 40 mark, which is where we started back in 2006. Literally off an email, I banged around all of the teams saying, anyone interested in accessibility, because I hadn't even formed a team properly yet, and I was just going to be in the boardroom. I've got some free sandwiches and tea. It's amazing how many people turn up with, if you have free tea, sandwiches, cake, or coffee, or beer, particularly beer, you get a crowd. And it was absolutely packed, the amount of people that turned up, and so many of them got involved, and so many of them are actually people who've kind of gone up in the organization and sustained it as product managers, and they were junior developers when I met them. You know, and it's kind of this organization, this network grew organically over the time. We've had several managers. Ian, who introduced us at the beginning, was one of them back in the day with Henny and myself when we first kind of really founded the idea of a champions network. Jamie and Lion took over for a while and grew the network and grew some of the structure around it. Emma really, you know, under Emma, we found that the growth of it accelerated, and she started bringing in sort of more of the network and communications channels. And we found that it's become, you know, one of those things that it's not difficult to manage, but when you start managing something at scale, you end up with an entirely different set of problems when you've got a small community. And Charlie took over right at the beginning of lockdown. So you've taken in the most problematic and difficult time. And so I'm going to hand over to Charlie now to tell you a little bit more about the network, and I'll stay silent until the end. All right, thanks.
Cheers, thanks Gareth. So yeah, welcome to my part of the talk around the Accessibility Champs Network. I took it over, as Gareth was saying, right at the beginning of lockdown. So it's been a real learning curve of how we can do things differently, but it's also great because we've managed to see things from a completely different point of view. But as Gareth was saying, we've got about 215 accessibility champions now. It's amazing to see so many people passionate about embedding accessibility into their work on a daily basis. So the champions, they work across many different departments, which really does provide us kind of a reach across the business, because just being in such a small team, we really couldn't achieve that alone. The network's grown, but it is supported by the accessibility team. The aim of the network really is to develop the skills to change the way that people think about accessibility in designs, and to feel confident to have those really important conversations right at the beginning of the project rather than the panic at the end, and ensuring accessibility as a voice just right when we're creating at the very beginning. So it is vital to have a true understanding of how your work and how your design and how the codes that you write have this direct impact on people. So if we can really see the barriers that we create in making those decisions, or the barriers that you can take down as a consequence of your ideas and actions, we can create something that everyone can access. There is a need for every organisation to understand their approach to design and building, and it's a difference, like Gareth was saying before, than between disabling or enabling the users. So for this to happen, there needs to be a real shift from just this mentality of compliance to embedding a model based on more human-focused culture and less box-ticking culture. So we thought, how can our team, being so small, nurture this strong culture in a network, and how can we develop the champions, and how can we foster a collaborative spirit and really strengthen their skills? So I joined the team in April, and I came in here really to work on this culture and to just develop the way that we interact with each other and consume information. So it was great for me really to come at this time of change, because I think that allowed us to really think about different ways of doing this and to pick up on other ways that people are doing it across the globe. So now more than ever, we need to think about this and the way that we learn and the way that we support each other, and just our whole working environment, our complete life environment has changed. So I'll give you some details about the network. The members of our network have come to us. Like Gareth was saying before, we don't actively recruit really anymore. Like people, a lot of it is really word of mouth. And the first thing that any champions manager, me included, needed to understand is what really motivates someone to join a network. If we can take the time to kind of understand that motivation, we can push them in the right way and really tailor the needs of the network to suit the individual. So I've not really come in here to change what the BBC network does, but I'm just here to ensure it evolves and it thrives naturally. So the way that we run our network currently is based on quite a fixed model. There's a process to join, there's regular catch-ups, there's resources, but we're really trying to fit that model to the individuals and to multiple product cultures. So the model worked quite well when we had a smaller network, but as we've seen it grow, the needs of the network has changed and its diversity have changed, and the people within it has also changed. So we really needed to think differently in the way that we create this culture within it, and really to create the right balance of identity and flexibility. So it was important to adapt any network like this, rather than just keeping it the way it is because it worked at the beginning. We need to keep assessing the network to see how we can make it change, to see how we can accommodate the changing needs of an organization, but also the changing needs of the people that are joining this network. So at the minute, we're currently in the process of asking what does and what doesn't work. Are people staying actively engaged? And do the champions really feel that they're part of something bigger? So the reality is that the network has to work as an entity in its own right, as well as fit in the individual culture of each team. So when you look at the teams inside the BBC, the sport team is vastly different to the one in the CBeebies team. The culture is completely different. The pace, the way of working, even the relationship to the audience. So we really needed the network to work for the individual. Next slide, Gareth. To work for the individual and to have a think about their development and accommodate their way of learning. We don't want the joiners of the network to start off all enthusiastic. They come to us, they want to have all this conversation, they're desperate to learn and get all the information straight away. But sometimes that means that they can feel a little overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that they need to learn or that is available to learn, and the jargon that we can sometimes use, especially if you're coming from a different background. So we just don't all learn in the same way either, and we don't all learn at the same pace. So especially in the new world that we're in at the minute, we thought as a team that we really needed to adapt the style of teaching and the training and the delivery to make it easy to consume and process in maybe smaller amounts, especially due to the environment that we might be working in. So at the minute, the accessibility team also has a second change manager, and which is Becky Nancaro, and she really does focus on this skills development from an individual point of view and as a group. So we look at it from various different ways. everyone in our accessibility team contributes to this network. So we draw from established and emergent skills in the network, but that means we also act as consultants, we act as trainers, we act as peers for the group as well. We're kind of like subject dating agents. And our different backgrounds also make us really strong as a team. So some are recovering developers, some have worked as creatives in the past, some are project and people management, and we have knowledge in various different areas. And as a team, we're pretty neurodiverse as well. So for me, I think it was important to keep people really motivated and to keep that excitement going from when they first came to me about embedding accessibility into their product and to the way that they think about design. So getting teams to embrace the social model of disability and ask the good questions, mainly from building things and making them accessible to building accessible things. So we tried to think about it in these layers. We try and think about how we can support the individual and their motivations and the way of learning, and then how they work as a team and how they work with other teams in the BBC, how they work as part of the network and as part of this larger organization, and then how we deliver to the audience as well. So like I mentioned before, the network has grown in size and it grew quite quickly. So we used to have an accessibility team, and now we kind of have this wonderful accessibility army, but we need to mobilize it a little bit. So we're currently manning an exercise, and genuinely this is one I would recommend for any network to do regularly, regardless of how long you've had it. We're reaching out to the champions to get feedback, and that was something right at the very beginning when I joined this group. Like I found the feedback was invaluable. You saw it from these different points of view. What worked for one person just didn't work for the other. Some people felt they were missing things. Some people were struggling in the way that they were learning. So we wanted to make sure that people felt supported and that they belonged to something. And I also was really keen about how we can develop the network in the future and what they would really want to get out of it, because it's their network and we have to listen and make sure that we're providing the right balance of support and that we're not overwhelming people with lots of jargon and information. How our communication goes out is really key. We're looking at mentoring to make sure that there's people that have come in and they might not have these connections to different groups, or they might even be the only one in their product team that's focusing on accessibility or asking those questions. And we also want to create these opportunities for them in the future to network with other people. So I found that it was really vital for the network to have this open communication with its membership, because creating a culture with over 200 people can be really difficult and it can be quite time consuming, especially if you're the one that's just creating this network for the first time and there's only maybe one or two of you trying to, you know, if you've grown it quite massively and you're having to manage all these people, it can be quite difficult. So this is where the accessibility guilds and the leads came in handy, and that's what I've started to develop at the minute. So you've got in BBC News and Sport and iPlayer, the champions naturally started creating these subgroups and they were beginning to form into guilds. Some of our longest serving champions have been so good that their products have actually created roles for them. So we've got 3 currently. We've got Sophie in BBC Sport. We've got Catherine, who became the first accessibility lead in BBC News and even is running her own training programs for her teams that work well for them. And Andy in BBC iPlayer. So looking at it, one of the last things you really need is a small accessibility team that everyone leans on. So, you know, the scenario where an accessibility board just rocks up a few weeks towards the end of a project, does an audit, and then attempts to perform these miracles, which we all know just don't work out as intended, and actually take an awful lot longer time and resource and money than having a look at it right at the very beginning. So instead, the accessibility team really supports the product team to embed this accessibility. The guilds and leads are really proof that the product own this and they value accessibility as part of their kind of business as usual. So never really discourage the evolution of accessibility in a product. It's what we're trying to create and it's what we're creating with this large network, because ultimately that's exactly what we need to happen. These products own their accessibility, and as a champs manager, I have to find the balance of this support that works for the individual, the support that works for the team dynamic, and then ensuring people that they're part of something bigger. So it's not just bigger in terms of the BBC either, but in terms of the wider accessibility community, that, you know, we're there to share ideas, support and encourage. So the accessibility team should be the enablers. So it's our responsibility to make sure that the champs have the resources that they need, the visible support when they need it, and an open mind when they're asked questions. As a collective group, we try and keep the team cross-pollinating ideas through various different channels. It's whether it's Slack or Teams or whatever tools that you use. And many of the champions actually come up with ideas and approaches that have been adopted by other teams. The Slack and Teams are great tools to share, and there are others that, you know, that you can use, but they're also great there to ask for help, to find solutions. And sometimes you'll spot people just giving some inspiration, a talk that they've seen that they've found has really changed the way that they've viewed something. And I think a channel can promote this sense of community, and it really allows people, even you, to be able to see the products and the projects that your champions are working on. You can spot these kind of success stories everywhere where people are they're just proud of the work that they're doing. So it can enable the accessibility team to also spot any places where we can offer support, or even these success stories that could be passed on to the rest of the BBC and get the credit back and really kind of raise the profile of accessibility. So for me, I think making it easy to access the information is key, especially when I first came into this group. There's a lot of information everywhere, and I think it was key for me to be able to go through that and find these grouped bits of information that we can all learn together. So it can be formal pages where we can put that, such as intranet with news and profiles and links to resources, or less formal, such as delivery of training focused at specific roles. We had podcasts as well, and we've got a couple of videos that are actually made by the accessibility team, short 2-minute videos that will just provide you with an insight into someone's daily routine. The champions also share those kind of videos, which is wonderful. And we've now got mentoring opportunities so that these newcomers get one-to-one support that they feel that they need. For anyone thinking about starting a network, I think it's about how to instill confidence and how to behave as equals, to see the accessibility champions as leads, part of your peer group, and as your colleagues, really. You know, you're all looking at this as a wide group together. So like Gareth said before, accessibility it's not a dark art. And I think if you feel like it's seen like that in your organization, then maybe you do need a network to dispel, you know, the myths and to spread the magic a little bit as well. So I think, you know, especially in the time that we're living in at the minute, we've constantly had to go through external changes, we've gone through culture changes. For us, we've gone through staff changes, and our needs change as well. And the BBC at the minute, especially with having a new DJ, is undergoing a significant change as well. I think the key is not to lose any of that intrinsic value while supporting a network through this time of uncertainty and upheaval, really. And by focusing on culture as an approach, by acknowledging that culture, you know, cannot be dictated, just it has to be encouraged to grow. You can strengthen the community and encourage its positive reinforcement and openness. I think members of any network really do need to feel supported and to feel listened to and have pride and ownership in the decisions that they make. So over the last few years, various organisations have started to develop their own champions network, and you may have heard of some of them. There's many, but these are the ones that are fairly big at the minute. None of them are carbon copies of what we've done. They're just trying to find a model that's driven by their organisational need, by their ethos, and by their own organisational culture. And I think, you know, in the next few months, I'm looking to set up an external accessibility champs network of champions managers. And I've decided to do this for a couple of reasons, really. I wanted to create a community where we can support our peers, or we can talk about different ideas, where members can come together to discuss accessibility solutions and to share the fantastic work that we're doing. We need to have a group where we can all support each other, especially if you maybe just starting the network and you want to come somewhere for advice and support. So if you are interested in joining that network and you haven't got a network going already, just please get in touch with me. So there are some things that I would recommend. So is to build a network based on people who really are already sold on the idea. with any level of skill, to ensure the champions realise that they're the voice of the user and not just responsible for delivering, to train the people that are joining the network. Your first point of contact should be training. There's no point joining a network and kind of going, there you go, you're part of a network, you know, it's fine now, you should know what you're doing. We need to make sure that we're giving them the resources and in manageable chunks and tailored maybe specifically to their role. Translate WCAG and user needs into something that are usable. So design library components, component technical documentation, research methodologies, recommended tools, have additional resources and information maybe about articles, events like this that they can attend or even speak at if they find that they're doing something completely different, or even just to support people. WCAG is only really part of the story. Provide communication channels, I think, is really important, such as Slack, Teams, distribution lists. We're starting up a newsletter currently. Talk to them and build upon existing culture, and especially for them as a person, but mainly in their product team, and celebrate successes with them. Make sure their work is recognized by the organization. That's a great way to be able to get that out for the rest of the BBC. It might even just start these conversations, and people that haven't tried to even look at accessibility to see these success stories and think, oh wow, that's a fantastic design. I wouldn't have even thought of that. So we know the job is never done, and we need to keep continuing to sustain it. We need to keep adapting it. We need to keep developing it. When the environment that we create nurtures people just to have a go, and when the champions are teaching each other and asking questions, we can see these products and projects becoming accessible naturally. So I think we find we're equal partners in accessibility. And I think together we'll be able to shape the way that accessibility looks in the future to the BBC. So thank you. Gareth, have you got anything to add? I feel like I've covered it, to be honest. So
yeah. I think the pair of us need to learn to speak slower. It's terrible. We're really quick, but yeah.
That's my brain working overtime.
Dreadful trying to be concise. It's yeah, I think there's various bits and pieces. I'm sorry, apologies if anyone couldn't see the list of the Champions Network organisations. It was my fault. Should have listed that out. So ones that at the time we were pulling this together, we were talking to Barclays and Microsoft, Google, Intuit, gov.uk, or organisations we know of. And Charlie, Charlie started to try and find all of these Champions Networks or ones that are out there, and you've had a terrific response so far, haven't you?
I think I found there's been about 30 different networks that I found that are either just starting up, or that are interested in starting a network, or even that have been established maybe 6 months to a year, that kind of have gone, I've started it, but then everybody's slowed down a little bit. How can we encourage? And I think having these conversations with people made me think, well, yeah, we've got lots of knowledge here. We've got a network that's been going for 10 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, 8, I think, is the official.
The official line. So yeah, because we've been going for so long, we've seen these peaks and troughs, and changed managers and changed approaches, and we've got all this knowledge, and I presume other networks have got the same. And I think having this environment to be able to share that would be really helpful, especially for ones that have only just started.
And even for us, I mean, it's one of those things, we're constantly trying different things, and things work at different scale and different types of organizations. I mean, obviously the BBC's got a scale problem that not every organization has. It's absolutely massive in as far as the variety of input, and also the way that it is structured and managed is incredibly complicated. With we have a public service arm, we have world service, we also have a wholly owned commercial division which acts separately to us. From the outside world, as far as everyone concerned, it's all the BBC. And it's all funded in a different way, and it's all managed slightly different. It has very, very different audiences, and so it's an interesting one when having conversations with champions in world service. They have to think of a non-Western perspective of accessibility, so they're thinking about assistive technologies in ways that we wouldn't think about assistive technologies in more developed and nations. And thinking about accessibility in terms of how accessible can something be in on a feature phone with an Opera browser in a 240 pixel wide phone in Burundi. And they're dealing with 44 languages, and they're dealing with, you know, an audience of 500 million.
Yeah.
It's massively complicated. And then, you know, and then we kind of look at what we have to do, you know, as sort of UK public service and go, well, that's completely different.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that I found recently was, as I was reaching out and doing all these feedback sessions, someone kind of popped up and went, we look at internal accessibility, and I kind of thought, oh yeah, like so we've got this little group that's popped up that have gone, hey, you know, the systems that we use are different and the guidelines that we have are slightly different when it comes to doing things internally. So we've created our own group called the Community of Practice, and this is what we're working on, and these are the training sessions that we're doing just for our independent group. And that was just something that happened naturally from a completely different perspective because it was internal. So I think it's even more complex than just about the audience. It's also about the staff that we have as well.
Yeah, so we've got so one of my other team is the internal assistive technology team, who I've not been managing for I don't think I've been in position there for a year yet, but yeah, they've got a completely different set of challenges, and with an organization that, you know, we've done you know, it's got a commitment to drive towards, you know, 12% of its staff being disabled, and it's pushing, it thinks at 10.5% at the minute. And there's a heck of a drive. You have to make, you know, with 400 internal systems, again, all across, you know, some of them are procured, some of them are commissioned, some of them we build ourselves, some of them are off the shelf and then customized, some of them are you know, stuff that has kind of drifted in via the back door because they're collaborative platforms. And so they've got a completely different set of challenges, because, you know, one of the things you can't, you know, employ people and by the choices that you've made, as far as your internal systems are concerned, you can't design and engineer them out of their jobs. You know, you've got to, you know, and you'll see that, and any organization, you'll see it in your rates of attrition. You know, people are coming in and just leave because they're so frustrated because they can't perform. So you're in a constant cycle of trying to push recruitment to refresh a group that this is kind of a pointless exercise. And so there's yeah, it's a very, very different set of challenges again. And so that flexibility in the way that something like this is managed, and as Charlie has talked about, it's that kind of respecting the culture and challenges that each different part of the network has.
Yeah.
They all have different needs, and it's not, you know, and so creating a program that makes sense is quite difficult. It's quite complicated, but you know, particularly in our organization.
Yeah, you have to be flexible. And I think it's about listening to the champs. Like, you can create a network and you think everything's structured and that's great, but unless you listen to them, some of them will go, oh yeah, this really works for me. And others have gone, actually, for my team, that's not how we work in this way. And so I think you don't want to split the network out and kind of do too many different things. It gets confusing, especially the organization that we've got. So I think this is why this natural progression of accessibility in each area is just something that we support rather than drive sometimes. You know, this community of practice started completely on its own, and I've only just come in now and gone, oh, I didn't realize this was a thing. That's wonderful in such a big organization. And I kind of go, right, so what do we need to support that? You know, what training are you doing? Can I pass some people on that are in the other side of the network to just come along and see how we do things internally? So it's about this kind of collaborating and also listening as well.
Yeah, they fix each other's problems every now and again, which is really useful. You know, you see this happens as well as an accessibility team. If you're going to try and scale your operation, and this is what, hence the title of the talk, it's a really important thing that you do it this way, because, you know, you find that sometimes, you know, you're dealing with things that repeat. You know, and I've been sort of in this position for 15 years now, and sometimes, you know, in the past, particularly in the early days, you know, I felt like I just literally wanted to take a tape recording of my side of a conversation and just send that to the meeting, because it would be continuously on repeat, and you'd be dealing with the same issues over and over and over again. And now those have just gone away. You know, we used to have like I used to measure it on 3 crises a week within the organization, and we're probably down to about 3 a year now, and everything else is kind of fine-tuning and developing and sustaining the work. And dealing with the natural, again, it's attrition within the organization. You know, any organization has a turnover of, you know, between 5 and 10% would probably be, you know, quite reasonable within its workforce. You know, sometimes higher, and it's kind of reasonable. And so you've got this constant flow of people who need support, who come in and go, right, I'm suddenly in the deep end, and there's an expectation around me, and you're constantly trying to find ways of supporting that. And the champions start supporting each other. You know, we've had it quite a few times when you see instances of one team popping up and saying, we're doing this over here, and we're kind of a little bit of a loss on the way that we should be approaching this problem. And then another team, you know, they might be in news or sport or somewhere, you know, learning, and then someone in children's pops up and goes, we saw that 6 months ago when we were building X.
The information.
Here's the stuff. And you suddenly find, well, this is why we end up being more of a, you know, a dating agent than
We just link.
you guys need to go for a brew, you know, that's it, and talk, and we'll stay out of it. And they really do support and help each other, and it's trying to foster that communication, I think, is quite an important thing.
I think as well, when you were talking about attrition, it's about keeping the knowledge in the team. I think, you know, if you've got attrition and these people with extreme, you know, great accessibility knowledge that are sharing things and they move on somewhere else, it's about trying to harvest that kind of information and recording it somewhere and providing resources.
Yeah, Mike Paciello knows what I mean when we talk about that. And
Hey, Gareth.
You're there. Hey,
Gareth and Charlie.
Yeah.
This is Adrian busting in. Because
we talk all day.
well, no, I love that you two are preemptively answering questions. Big fan of that, by the way. But we do have some questions in the queue, right,
Yeah.
Joe?
go for it.
We've had a lot of questions come through, and just to say, it's so brilliant to hear you both talking. Your enthusiasm and your clear care just really comes through. It's absolutely brilliant. Charlie, you mentioned the fact that what works for one team won't work for another. So we've had a question from David that says, how do you evaluate the differing levels of maturity between each team? And then how do you guide them to grow the accessibility of their products?
Oh, Gareth.
Well, that's a double-header question. Shall I have a little bit of a crack in it and you chip in? It's not necessarily about maturity. It's about context as well. So if you're, say, a team in as Charlie's pointed out with CBeebies and sport, you know, the if you're not familiar with the CBeebies brands, that no one's over the age of 6, and so they're trying to make stuff accessible for, you know, children who maybe not using assistive technologies, because assistive technologies use for the under 6s is very limited, if hardly existing at all. As far as, you know, in the same way that adult assistive technology is used, we're trying to think of accessibility, or the team are trying to think for carers and parents, some of which may be grandparents or people who, you know, there are disabled parents out there who are then assisting children who may or may not have conditions. And so you've got this 2-tier approach. There's more gamification within the under 6s and less informational pages. Their challenges are massively different. And so it's being intelligent to understanding the context of the challenge of the team, and then you might have to have a very, very, very different approach.
That's where you spot these gaps, don't you? You kind of see the gaps, and you're thinking, okay, you can understand their audience and their culture. And then I've done little things like I've done feedback with the whole team, or the ones that are the specific champions, or I've sat in some of their training sessions and gone, okay, you show me what it is that you're training and what areas you're covering, and you can just kind of spot the gaps and go, right, okay, I can see these areas, and then pass the training on to the rest of our team. So it's not an audit, it's more just like, this is great, you know, what else do we need to do? But it is about understanding the audience, definitely.
Yeah, and for us as an accessibility team, our audience is the champions. And so it's a two-way street. I mean, one thing I always say, if I ever do anything that's around, you know, you're talking to users, I always say, please complain, because if you guys go quiet, you know, I worry. You know, I think it's great if we don't get any complaints coming in, but I also worry, it's just like, have they given up? Are they not talking to us? What have we done? Because you constantly need a feedback loop. And
Yeah.
so the champions look at the resources that we're building, and so one of the things is, we'll build the straw man, we'll build the the version 0.9 of the resource. We'll put something together and try and do it as close together, and then through the point with things like the GelTech docs is then create a community amongst the champions to actually critique it and say, actually, that's not clear, that doesn't work for us, we build that in a slightly different way. Because you have to drive to the needs of the product as well as the product's audience to get the information through to them right. And if you try and drive your way of doing it, you're going to end up creating a kind of loggerhead between you and there's going to be a standoff. You've got to think about it. So we never dictate technology, but we dictate, what we try and do is say, things like doing a documentation driven development approach is we're describing the outcomes for the user, we're describing behaviors of the code, we're describing the user experiences of the code, not the code itself.
Yeah.
And so, it's all about, for us, it's about user outcomes.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't care if it's AA, AAA compliant. If everyone can use it, it's worked. And if AA compliance happens along the way, then that's brilliant. But it's not the goal to be compliant. It's the goal for, with children, it's the goal is everyone can join in the fun, and if someone is left out of the game, then that's wrong. And so you've got to find a way of bringing children in.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got maybe time for one more very quick question. As someone has asked, do you have an approach for selecting champions? If someone raises their hand, are they automatically part of the champion community, or do you have requirements that they have to meet?
No, I think it's open to everybody. I think the more people that we can get involved is better than selecting people. They come along, they come to me, they say, hey, yeah, I'd like to become a champion. I've heard a member of my team talk about it, or I was working on a product and I all of a sudden realized I didn't know enough information. And so they come to me and we have a really informal conversation that lasts about half an hour, 40 minutes. And I'll go through, have you heard about this? Have you, one of the things that me and Gareth first spoke about at the beginning is sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So they can come along and we'll go, these are the options of things that you could be learning about right now as a base level, but also tell me why you've come along, what it is that prompted you. Do you have any kind of specific interest that we can really get you excited about accessibility, rather than firing off all these different ideas and training sessions that might not even work for them in their job role. So I think for us, it's the more the merrier. Come along, we'll have a conversation and we'll tailor it to you naturally.
Yeah, and we've got a real mix of people in there. We would, getting business analysts, designers, developers, QA engineers, product managers. Don't care, people from editorial. Everyone has an impact around it. And one of the great things is, they sit in the sprints and they become the voice of the user. They don't become responsible for accessibility, but they become responsible. They talk about it in every sprint. How are we going to do this? And they keep that conversation going. And if you've got the conversation going, the rest of it becomes much easier.
Yeah. Nice. So we've had so many questions come in. I don't know if either of you have time after this to maybe answer some of the questions on YouTube, or maybe I could tweet them to you. But yes, clearly you have struck a lot of chords with our audience today.
I'm going to be here in the after party. I'm pushing on till past Billy's presentation, so don't worry. We'll pick up anything.
We're here all night.
We're here all night. Yeah.
We will warn Billy appropriately. Okay, well, thank you both. That was a great talk. I appreciate you both taking the time and answering the questions as they came flying in. And for our attendees, if you like this session, hit that YouTube like button. And don't forget, you can subscribe to youtube.com/inclusivedesign24 to be kept in the loop for our future events and keep track of the session URLs as they come up throughout the day. A reminder that Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to Barclays Access, Adobe, Intopia, Tetralogical, InfoAxia, Intuit, WebAble, DQ Systems, and something called Adrian Roselli LLC. Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the hour with our next session, and we will see you then.